There's a part of every old building that no one wants to talk about. The hallways that feel wrong when the lights are off. The stairwells where shadows linger longer than they should. The rooms that hold more than just furniture. I worked in one of those buildings, and what I experienced there at night is something I can't forget, even now, years later. I used to work as a custodian at a middle school for almost 5 years. Overnight shifts were my domain. I clocked in around 10 p.m. and stayed until right before the sun rose, when the buses began to pull in and the halls erupted in chaos. At first, I liked the solitude. No children running, no teachers complaining, no one really demanding anything from me. The quiet felt peaceful, but that peace didn't last. It started subtly, with small things that made the building feel alive in a way that was wrong. The pipes would knock, the floors creaked as if the school were exhaling. Lockers would pop open without explanation, and in the silence of the night, my mind insisted those sounds were footsteps. I learned to ignore most of it. I had to. But the basement? That was different. The school was old, built in the 1950s, and the basement spanned under half the building. It wasn't finished like the classrooms, just a concrete maze of narrow hallways, low ceilings, and dangling wires. Some rooms were filled with old desks stacked to the ceiling, others with boxes of outdated textbooks. Broken furniture leaned precariously against the walls. It smelled damp, like mildew mixed with dust. The flickering fluorescent lights offered little comfort. Most nights, I needed a flashlight just to navigate. The older custodians had warned me. Avoid the basement unless you absolutely have to. It's not worth it, one said with a nervous chuckle. Haunted, he called it. I laughed along, but even on my first week, the unease I felt there was undeniable. It was 2 years into my job when I finally had no choice. My task list had a single item that sent a cold chill down my spine. Bring the folding chairs from the basement for a school event. I paused at the top of the stairwell, debating if I could ask my supervisor to postpone it until morning. Pride won. I opened the heavy metal door. The stairwell groaned under my boots, echoing unnaturally. At the bottom, I flipped the switch. 2 lights flickered weakly. The rest remained dark, leaving shadows that crawled along the walls. I swallowed, turned on my flashlight, and stepped into the abyss. The storage room where the chairs were kept was second on the left. I passed the first room, a mountain of old desks, and pushed open the second door. The air inside smelled of old wood polish and dust. The chairs were stacked unevenly, leaning like they might topple at any moment. I bent down to carry for it once. Then I froze. From somewhere down the hallway, a soft, dragging sound echoed. Slowly, like someone sliding a shoe across the concrete. My breath hitched. I strained my ears, but the sound stopped. I forced myself to move, convincing myself it was just a pipe, maybe a chair shifting. I made it to the stairwell, setting down the chairs, and returned for more. That's when it felt wrong. The stack of chairs looked different, like they had shifted while I was gone. My skin prickled. I chalked it up to paranoia and bent down to lift another set. A thump, followed by a scraping sound, came from a hallway behind me. I swung the flashlight beam. A door down the corridor was cracked open. I knew I hadn't touched it. Every instinct screamed to drop the chairs and run, but I edged closer. My voice cracked. Hello? Anyone down here? Silence. Then I stepped inside the room. Dusty boxes, broken desks, cobwebs, but empty. And then I heard it again, dragging behind me. This time, heavy and deliberate. My heart slammed against my ribs. I spun, flashlight slicing the darkness. Nothing. I backed to the stairwell, my breath ragged, grabbed the chairs, and ran up 2 steps at a time. Every sense screamed danger. I didn't stop until I was back on the main floor, leaning against the wall, shaking. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. They'd laugh. Say it was the ghost story the old custodian liked to tell. But I knew what I had felt. That cold draft, the dragging steps, the cracked door that shouldn't have been open. I never went back to the basement alone again. Weeks later, I heard 3 loud knocks above the stairwell, rhythmic, deliberate. The basement door rattled as if pushed from inside. I froze. My grip tightened on the mop handle. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I had already felt the building breathe in a way it shouldn't. I stayed by that stairwell until the sound stopped. I left the job a few years later. The basement remains etched in my mind, a place where the shadows weren't shadows, and the building had a pulse of its own. Every time I think about it, I feel that same cold, creeping dread, the sensation of being watched, followed, known. And I know, without a doubt, the basement wasn't empty. I worked as a custodian at a high school for 3 years, mostly overnight shifts. Being the newest guy on the team, I usually got the solo shifts. The building was huge, 4 floors, 2 gyms, a massive library, and an auditorium that gave me chills even in the daytime. At night, when the hallways were empty, it felt like a maze designed to trap you. Every sound bounced, every shadow seemed to move. The routine was simple but exhausting. Floor by floor, room by room, emptying trash, wiping down surfaces, mopping hallways, locking doors, and making sure every light was turned off. It usually took the whole night. If you rushed, you missed something. One Friday night, I was working alone. Another custodian had called out sick. I had no choice but to cover the entire building myself. At first, it was normal. I started on the first floor, emptying trash cans, wiping tables, mopping corridors. The old fluorescent lights flickered in several hallways, making the shadows jump unnaturally. But I convinced myself it was just the building settling. Around midnight, I made my way to the 3rd floor. That floor always gave me the creeps. It was quieter than the others, mostly older classrooms that weren't used anymore. Some were permanently locked. Others were storage rooms, filled with dusty books, broken furniture, and old lab equipment. As I walked past the lockers, the metallic clicks and echoes of my boots on the tiles made me jump more than once. I told myself it was normal, just the acoustics of the old building. Then I saw it. A door about 20 feet away was open. That struck me immediately because I had already checked every classroom earlier that evening. Every door had been locked. My first instinct was to keep walking and ignore it, but curiosity, or maybe fear, made me stop. I set down my mop and walked toward it, trying to make as little noise as possible. The door was one of the old wooden types with a square glass window. I pushed it open slowly and shined my flashlight inside. Empty. The desks were stacked along the walls. Boxes in the corners. Dust covering every surface. Nothing seemed out of place until I noticed one box near the back wall. It had been moved, tilted. Scuff marks led away from it across the floor. My stomach sank. I had closed that door earlier, and I knew I hadn't moved that box. I whispered to myself, probably nothing, just my imagination. Just tired. I was wrong. I shut the door and continued mopping, but my mind kept returning to that classroom. I checked the windows, locked from the inside. Hallway doors, locked as well. How could someone have gotten in? A cold pressure settled in the air behind me. The feeling of being watched. My skin prickled. My heart raced. I kept my flashlight pointed at the floor as I moved to the stairwell, hoping to escape the sensation. When I passed the classroom again, my blood ran cold. The door was wide open. The box I had seen tilted before was now in the center of the floor. Someone, or something, had moved it. I whispered, "Hello? Is anyone here?" No answer. Then I heard it. Slow, deep breathing. Not the wind. Not the building. It was deliberate right behind me. I spun, shining my flashlight, but the room was empty. Every muscle in my body screamed to run, but I stayed frozen. The breathing continued, heavy and labored, moving closer. I bolted to the stairwell. My hands were shaking, flashlight trembling. I didn't stop until I was safely on the lower floor. I called my supervisor, my voice shaking. He promised to come in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. I stayed as far away as I could, peeking over my shoulder every few seconds. When he arrived, he walked me back up to the classroom. The door was still open, the box in the center of the floor. We searched every corner, closets, under tables, behind desks. Nothing. No one. He suggested I must have been tired, imagining things. I didn't argue, but I knew what I had heard. That slow, heavy breathing, the cold pressure, the way the air had shifted around me. Weeks later, another custodian told me something that made my blood run colder than that night ever had. Years ago, a student had been caught hiding in that classroom overnight. They had snuck in to play a prank. Ever since, The room had rarely been used, and custodians avoided it at night. I wanted to believe that explained everything, but it didn't. I finished my shift, leaving quickly. The feeling of being watched didn't fade when I left the building. Every creak of a floorboard in my own home reminded me of that night. Months later, I had another overnight shift alone. I avoided the third floor as long as possible, moving quickly when I had to go there. Every shadow seemed alive. Every sound made me jump. Then it happened again. The door, ajar. The box moved. And that breathing, unmistakable, deliberate close. I didn't wait. I ran, ignoring my mop, ignoring the rest of the shift. Even now, years later, I hear it in my nightmares. The sound of slow, deliberate breathing in an empty classroom. The sensation of eyes on me, following, judging. I know I wasn't imagining it. I know that room wasn't empty, and I'll never step onto that floor again. I worked as a night custodian at an old high school for 2 years. The building was massive, 4 floors, 2 gyms, an auditorium that made my skin crawl, and hallways that seemed to stretch endlessly in the dark. Most nights were uneventful. I go floor by floor, room by room, empty trash, mop hallways, turn off lights, and lock doors. Routine, monotony, peaceful most of the time. But the auditorium was different. Even during the day, it felt off. At night, when the building was empty, it felt like a living thing. Shadows gathered unnaturally in corners, stretching into shapes that didn't belong. Sound carried strangely. A dropped broom could echo like a gunshot, and you'd swear footsteps were right behind you, only to see nothing. I always saved the auditorium for last. The fear of that place kept me on edge all night. And one night, that fear became real. It was late winter, around midnight. I had to clean the auditorium earlier than usual because there was a play the next morning. I arrived, dragging my cleaning cart behind me. The side door creaked like a scream as I opened it, and when it slammed behind me, the sound reverberated across the empty seats. I started sweeping between the rows of metal folding chairs, some bolted to the floor, others loose. The sound of the broom against the tile echoed eerily. Dust rose in clouds, coating the air with a gray haze. Then I heard it, soft rustling from the stage. My heart skipped a beat. I froze. The stage was empty, props stacked neatly in the corners. Chairs and painted scenery covered in dust. Nothing moved. My brain insisted it was a rodent, maybe a bird trapped in the rafters. I told myself it was nothing and continued sweeping. Minutes later, the sound returned. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossing the stage. Not a rat, not a bird. Heavy, solid footsteps, pacing as if someone was watching me from the shadows. My pulse raced. I stopped, flashlight beam shaking in my hand, and aimed it at the stage. Nothing. The props were still stacked. Dust covered everything. No footprints on the stage. Nothing. I tried to focus on my work, sweeping as quickly as possible. But every instinct screamed at me to leave. Then the whispering started. At first, it was faint, almost imperceptible. Low, drawn out, coming from the balcony seats above. I stopped mopping, straining to hear. My name, softly spoken. You? My flashlight beam darted around, searching. The balcony was empty, or so I thought. I told myself it was the acoustics, my imagination fatigue. I had been alone for hours. Surely my mind was playing tricks. But the whispers continued. Clear now. You shouldn't be here. My blood ran cold. I spun around, flashlight scanning the stage and aisles. Nothing. Every shadow leapt in the beam of my light. The temperature dropped suddenly, a cold, suffocating pressure pressing against my chest. My teeth chattered, and my hands shook. I tried to convince myself to finish cleaning, but the fear anchored me to the floor. I felt it, eyes on me everywhere. Behind the curtains, above the balcony, in the shadows that didn't belong. I took a step toward the stage. The whispering intensified, circling me now, echoing as if it were coming from multiple places at once. My flashlight beam caught something, a fleeting shadow crossing the stage. I blinked and it was gone. Then the footsteps started again. Slow, deliberate, around the perimeter of the stage. Not stopping, not slowing. They weren't human. I could feel the vibrations in the wooden floor. I wanted to run, but my body refused. My legs locked. My heart pounded so loudly it was deafening. I backed away slowly, keeping the flashlight pointed forward. The sound of whispering moved with me, drifting around my ears, circling, taunting. I reached the edge of the stage and tried the side door. Locked. My keys. I fumbled in my pocket, shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the keys were in my hand. I pulled the door open and ran. The cold night air hit me like a wall. Relief, temporary. I glanced back. The auditorium loomed behind me, silent once more. But the sensation remained, the lingering pressure, the whispering in the darkness, the eyes I could not see. I didn't return that night. I didn't return alone for weeks. When I finally told another custodian, he laughed. Old building, settling sound, shadows. Happens all the time. I didn't argue, but I knew what I had felt. I knew the whispering, the footsteps, the freezing pressure. I had never felt anything like it before or since. Then I learned the story. Years ago, a drama teacher had died suddenly in that auditorium during rehearsal. Heart attack, right on stage, in front of students. People said his spirit sometimes walked the stage at night. Sometimes you could hear him pacing, hear whispers in the seats. I tried to tell myself it was a story, just a way to explain old noises. But the feeling lingered. The next night, I had to return, my hands gripping the mop like a lifeline. Every shadow leapt at me. Every corner seemed alive. The whispering called my name again. Not softly this time, commanding. Direct. Leave now. I dropped the mop and ran. Out the door, down the hall, not daring to look back. Even now, years later, I sometimes pass an old auditorium. Even when it's crowded with students, I feel the same weight. The same eyes on me. And sometimes, just as I'm about to walk away, I hear it. A whisper carried from somewhere deep inside the building. You shouldn't be here.